Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I want to respond to a really short video by another creator entitled January 6th, A Day of Rebellion Against God. The video itself is really short. It's 1 minute and 3 seconds, and it's essentially a PowerPoint show that has slides that have images and some text and are set to some kind of annoying background music. But what's important about the video and the slideshow isn't what it says. It's what it doesn't say. I'm not going to show you all of the images that the presentation uses for two reasons. One, if I do that, I'll end up putting the whole video in my video, and I don't want to get into fair use or copyright strike territory. And secondly, you can predict pretty much what those images are going to be about. It's a whole bunch of random images of what happened at the Capitol on January 6th. I will show you the image, though, from slide 1 and the text that is on that slide. The next 6 slides are just Romans chapter 13, verses 1 and 2, chopped into little pieces and spread across a whole bunch of images. That's it. That's the whole thing. Okay, so let's look at it. Did he render the scriptures accurately? Yeah, I'd say he did that. Did he summarize them accurately? Again, I'd say yes, he hit the points correctly. Does he apply it correctly throughout his video? Yeah, not even close. A major problem with how he applies it is that Romans 13 suddenly now becomes situational scripture. If he actually believed what his slides imply, then consistency would demand that Romans 13 applied to all riots, all unlawful occupations, all assaults on police, all destruction of public property, all resistance to any lawful authority, which means the same slides would have to roll over to George Floyd riots, okay? These were instances where protesters looted and burned down the businesses of innocent people who had nothing whatsoever to do with what happened to George Floyd. It was really just an excuse to act a fool. How about the courthouse arsons? Chop Chaz, armed occupations of parts of Seattle, police precinct burnings, autonomous zones with checkpoints and weapons. But they don't. He doesn't use the slides that way. So what's really happening is this. Romans 13 is not being used as a universal moral principle. It's being used as a highly partisan filter to place selected targets under judgment while ignoring favored causes and allies. Suddenly it becomes not about insurrection or what happened. It's now all about who did it. Notice how the logic silently and quickly shifts. When this group riots, oh, that's rebellion against God. When that one over there, well, it's lamentable but understandable. When these people resist police, judgment, punishment. When those people resist police, well, that's understandable prophetic anger. Same actions, different moral category. That tells you immediately that the moral framework he's using is based on the outcome he wants, not on the principle. Scripture is being retrofitted here to conclusions he has already reached. But here's where he runs into a problem. If the video applied Romans 13 evenly, 3 uncomfortable things would happen. First, it would indict his own allies. Many of the same voices defended or excused BLM riots. They minimized property damage and looting and fires. They framed resistance to the police as contextual, depending on the situation. And they rejected law and order rhetoric as oppressive based on race or socioeconomic status. So applying Romans 13 consistently would force them to say those actions were also rebellion against God and deserve punishment. But they won't do that. He won't do that because the category of righteous protest must remain intact. It would also expose his hidden theology. Once you apply the passage broadly, it becomes obvious that the real theology here is authority is from God, except when we morally distrust the authority or sympathize with the cause. So it becomes situational and exceptional. That's not what Romans 13 says. That's moral intuition wearing a Bible verse as a hat. It would invite legitimate pushback. The minute you apply Romans 13 universally, people will ask, well, what about unjust laws? What about corrupt enforcement? What about selective prosecution? What about police standing down versus cracking down? What about unequal punishment? Those are hard questions. They're legitimate questions. And so the scope stays narrow. January 6th only, safe target. List of villains already approved. There's another convenient little sleight of hand trick going on. January 6th is framed as an ideological rebellion. Other riots and uprisings are framed as emotional eruption to events. One is insurrection. The other is a response to pain. And that distinction does all the moral work, and none of it comes from Romans 13. And that's why this video is actually dangerous, not because it condemns January 6th. Plenty of reasonable people do exactly that. But because it teaches viewers that A, Scripture is a weapon for outgroups. It's to be used against other people. B, God's judgment maps cleanly onto our political enemies, but not to us. And C, silence equals consent when our side does it. That's how you train people to stop thinking morally and start sorting tribally. The quiet irony here is the people who most often misuse Romans 13 this way are usually the same ones who would be horrified if it were applied to civil rights marches, labor movements, anti-war protests, underground churches, historic resistance to unjust regimes, which tells you everything you need to know. Now, the claim will almost certainly be made in the comments on my video that I'm endorsing what happened on January 6th. I'm not saying that and never have. I'm saying that if you're going to apply Scripture to people's actions in situations like this, you need to do it consistently, regardless of which side of the cause you're on. Failure to do that is hypocrisy and abuse of Scripture to advance personal agendas, just like we see happening in that video.